Very cool. Small world.
What are we talking about?
So we are talking about, as you guys know, we're just about to go live here on YouTube. That video that I had sent you
What are
about.
we talking about?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the secrets to success in love and dating and the dynamics between men and women. We have three of you who are dating experts: Jonathan, you, Jennifer, as well as Lisa Concepcion. And then we have Jeannie Engel-Morum, who also has a successful podcast. Her and her husband, who is an ordained Lutheran minister, have a really candid and open podcast on intimacy and sex, which is very enlightening, I think, especially since he's an ordained minister. And that's, in fact, how I met them, because our kids used to go to elementary school together. So she should be on very shortly, too. So we are officially live here on YouTube. We are 3 minutes past the hour. So yes, let's go ahead and we can all put the little do not disturb on our phones. I will do that myself, which I normally do before I get on air, but I don't know why I somehow did not do it until you mentioned it, Jonathan. And okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Love and Money Secrets TV. I'm your host, Dame Lillian Walker, and today I'm so very excited because we have some relationship experts and coaches to give you some insights, tactics, timelines, and tools in order to improve your love life. And we have with us today, we have Jonathan Aslay, who is one of America's leading midlife dating coaches and has expanded into a deeper, essential philosophy of what it truly means to love. And he is the author of several books, which I hope he will share the titles with us during this broadcast, so people like you with families like yours can enjoy and glean the wisdom that he has put in there for you and for me. We also have Jennifer, and Jennifer is also a relationship expert as well. And give me a moment here. And Jennifer is a certified dating and relationship coach and the founder of Joytopia Coaching in Los Angeles. And she helps conscious people find the right romantic partner and create a healthy relationship with them. So thank you guys for being here today. We have a couple more relationship experts that hopefully will be joining us soon. But if not, we got the cream of the crop to get started today. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as we get started here, one of the things that I wanted to, the reason why I brought specifically you individually to this broadcast was because you guys have a unique twist in how you approach things. And so I thought, as I was watching Jonathan Gray, who is the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and Beyond Mars and Venus, which is a fantastic book that not only talks about the relationship and the place from which men pivot as opposed to women pivot, obviously men being Martians, women's being Venusians, but in Beyond Mars and Venus, he also talks about how behaviorally we biologically need relationships with each other in order to just be hormonally balanced, and in order for us to live a completely fulfilling lives, there are things that behaviorally, biologically, it's not just a psychological issue, and we're well aware of. We don't operate in fragments. We are entire beings. And so everything is connected, not only within our system, but also as it relates to others. And so as women, in order for us to be hormonally balanced, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually balanced, women not only need other women, but we also need men, and specifically a romantic partner, in order for us to be happy and healthy, and vice versa. And so is, the order of the universe, so to speak. So I wanted to discuss what your insights are and some of the things that you've discovered in your journey. And so, Jonathan, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, only because you're the only guy that we're outnumbering you 2-1 at this very moment. So we'll give you the platform first.
My favorite place to be. So I want to share my perception really quickly on John Gray's work. And while I respect the concept or the scientific aspect that biology does play an important part in the mating process. And, when we think of the mating process, I'm saying specifically mating, men mate with women, meaning we want to spread our seed. So from a biological perspective, a lot of what he talks about is valid. I have a deeper, let me say, invitation for everybody to look beyond the biology, because there are 3 more additional components that make up the dating, mating, and relating process. Okay. And so, and let me share what those are. There's the socialization that happens for both men and women that happens while we're growing up, our socialization that happens from society and traditions and things like that, that isn't biology based. But what's even more important is our childhood upbringing and the wounds and traumas that happen in childhood, as well as the wounds and traumas that happen in adulthood that make up our entire personality. So why I'm saying this is, biologically, we can differentiate between men and women. But from an emotional perspective, we are human beings, both men and women alike, experiencing childhood wounds and traumas and adult experience and traumas that isn't gender-based. And so I appreciate his work, but what it's missing is those other components when it comes to dating, mating, and relating and understanding, because it's not about understanding men and women. There's this, I'm going to say that I don't appreciate the divide that's created between men and women and all of the expectations associated between men and women when it comes to mating. Why I'm saying all this is to create an awareness that there's more to it. So for example, from an emotional perspective, there's love attachment style, anxious, avoidant. There's the imago from Harville Hendrix, which is following our patterns of choosing our parents over and over and over again in relationship. And so I've just thrown a lot into the stew without giving a lot of meat here, but I wanted to say this in comparison to John Gray. I appreciate his work. It's just missing so much that we can't pigeonhole biology when it comes to the mating process. Other than just having sex and making babies, we can absolutely use biology from that perspective.
Yeah, and so that's exactly, okay, so what I hear you saying, you said that some of the 3 components that are aside from just the inherent desire for men and women to mate, there's also the socialization aspect. There's childhood, how you are brought up in your formative years, which we all experience. And then there's the wounds and traumas, not only from childhood, but also from adulthood. Do I understand you correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's
and
it.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I do disagree with, but that's part of why we have you on the show, so that we get the different perspectives about John Gray being having a huge component missing. So maybe we can uncover why you perceive that. As I used to be more of a black and white, person, and not so much in the gray, but now I'm understanding.
But when I say disagree, I'm just saying when it comes to the dating process, it's just missing something. It's missing a lot of the deeper conversation that's more emotional versus the biology of human beings. That's all I'm saying. I'm not disagreeing with them. I'm just saying when you want to apply from dating, mating, relating, you got to look at everything. You can't pigeonhole one sector and say this relates to all men and women.
I agree. No, I agree. And so I want to hear that perspective and those areas that you think maybe aren't addressed or covered in his work that you're exposed to. I'd like to have Jennifer chime in and kind of give her 2 cents as to basically what we've discussed so far. What are your thoughts and your, inclinations as you hear this unfolding, Jennifer?
Well, I'm definitely not in disagreement with Jonathan. A big part of the work that I do has to do with how our programming, as he was saying, like our childhood upbringing. I call it a love blueprint, right? It's the culmination of our childhood experiences, what we witnessed in our parents, our early experiences with dating. There's a lot of different factors that go into creating our love blueprint. And I definitely think if you want a healthy relationship, you do not want to not be aware of what's actually going on subconsciously for you. Are you still there? Sorry, it seemed like you cut out for a second.
Can we
Hello?
see you?
Okay, sorry, she
We're here.
was cutting out for a minute. And so I'm definitely not in disagreement with Jonathan about the subconscious mind piece. As far as the biological piece, I think that's also really important. I usually tell people there's really two main things you want to look at if you're looking at wanting to transform your relationships. The first is all your programming. The second definitely is, I really like this conversation because for me, before I was a dating and relationship coach, I was just a woman who was dating. I was a woman who was trying to find the right guy. I was pretty much a hot mess in relationships, if I'm being fully transparent. And I was just trying to, find my guy. I just wanted to find the right man. I wanted a life partner. Wasn't sure if I wanted a family, but definitely wanted that option. And I was just on this big search to figure out why, I was that woman who people were saying, why are you still single? And I'm like, well, that's the $64,000 question. I don't know. So I went on this big quest to figure out, exactly what it is that was keeping me from being in the type of relationship that, if I was being honest with myself deep in my heart, that's what I really wanted. And my two biggest discoveries were, number one, the programming piece, which we've already somewhat addressed. Number two was definitely this other piece about understanding that men and women are different. We are biologically different. We have different instincts, which is another huge piece of the puzzle. Is we've got this biology and we've got all these hormones that are influencing our behavior, but we also have survival instincts, and they're very different in men and women. Now they're based on providing and procreating, but that looks very different from women to men. And understanding this helped me to do several things. Number one, I stopped taking so many things personally, right? Like a lot of the things that women take personally are really men actually just being men and actually coming from a place of trying to provide for women, but it's misunderstood. And it's really important, I believe, if you want a healthy relationship, to gain a great understanding of your partner, of men, or if you're a man, of a woman. Zig Ziglar has this really fantastic quote, which is, sorry, not Zig Ziglar, it was Stephen Covey has this fantastic quote, which is if you want to be understood, seek first to understand. Yeah. And so for me, I took the focus off of, taking everything personally to going, maybe there's a good reason why this man I'm dating did this, and getting curious about why men did what they did, and not automatically assuming it's because, they can't commit, or because there's something wrong with me, or because, even going, we do all have, most of us have childhood wounds, but not automatically going to the place of, oh, he's wounded, so that's why he did it. Sometimes it just looks different for men and women. And I believe that if we want to be in healthy relationships, if we can approach this from a place of curiosity and wanting to learn about each other and wanting to understand each other's needs, I think it's a really good place to start. The best definition I've heard, it's really simple, of a healthy relationship is one where both partners are getting all or most of their needs met. And I think a lot of people hear that and they go, oh, that's unrealistic or whatever. I don't think it's unrealistic because I'm in a relationship like that. My husband and I are constantly working towards tuning into, okay, what do you need now? What do you need now? And it's dynamic. People say relationships are work. Yeah, I don't like the word work. I'll say effort and attention. I mean, you certainly can't sit back on your laurels and eat bonbons and ignore your partner, expect things to go well. But I think one thing that I encourage people to do is to understand that relationships are dynamic, and having consistent efforts toward tuning into what your partner needs in that minute, as well as having the communication skills to communicate your needs in a way that your partner can hear, won't feel defensive about, and be able to really hear you. Those are some really good things that were that you want to start with from my perspective, as far as creating a healthy relationship. As far as John Gray's work, I mean, look, I read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus when it came out 2030. I don't even remember when it came out, a long time ago. And it definitely was, the one of the beginnings of my journeys of understanding that men are different, biologically, psychologically, and in terms of what their instincts are, etc. And of course there are ways that we're the same, and I certainly have been involved in a lot of conversations talking about how we're not pigeonholed into purely masculine or feminine energy. We all have testosterone, we all have estrogen, but one of the things that really stood out for me in John Gray's book, some of which I already knew, but I learned actually a little bit more about women that I didn't know before in the recent book that we were discussing, is, men have 10 times the amount of testosterone that women do, and women have 10 times the amount of estrogen. That's a pretty significant difference in terms of, that's for a healthy man or woman. That's a pretty significant difference in terms of what kind of behaviors we should be doing and what things we should be focusing on in order to stay in a healthy balance. So I think, yeah, sure.
But here's the thing, so one of the pieces I forgot to mention, Lillian, is that I forgot to add life experience that shifts a lot of this conversation. And why I want to come back to life experience with the testosterone is because as men age, their testosterone levels drop and their estrogen levels increase. So when we talk about men and women, we should also be thinking at what age that they are at, because this makes a big difference in the conversation, because 20-year-old men don't operate the same as a 50-year-old man, not just because of life experience, because the chemicals do begin to shift. Those hormones begin to shift in the body. I just want to make a comment. I'm not negating John Gray's work. I am totally in agreement with the biology that plays in this. What I like to do is introduce the understanding, going back to the curiosity that Jennifer was talking about. The understanding is that there's a lot more to this mating process than just the biology piece. And you can't pigeonhole biology, because a 20-year-old doesn't operate the way a 50-year-old does, male or female. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, that's a very valid point. But the thing is that the biology is, and that I think that's what's so groundbreaking right now, is that, and UCLA Medical School, as well as Stanford Research Institute, has actual experiments and lab studies that actually have been written up that talk about how the biology and the behavior, how it's very intricately intertwined, so that a certain behavior and mindset causes a certain biology and chemical reaction hormonally in us.
Yeah, but I want to take this to another level, because what I'm really getting at when I say all of this is I'm talking about emotional maturity. What represents emotional maturity to be in a healthy, happy relationship? Because here's the way I view it. And am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, this is not a politically correct show. We want the truth.
We're all fucked up. It's a matter of degrees. Now, please, you forgive my languaging. What I'm saying is we all have these issues that play this part. And so emotional maturity is hard to define based on biology, because you could have you're a man, you're a woman. Okay, but that doesn't mean you're emotionally mature. And from what I've experienced as a dating and relationship coach, is most people are out there in the dating realm that lack emotional maturity. They lack good communication skills. They lack the ability to communicate their needs, wants, and desires in a way that doesn't come across as confrontational, contempt, criticism, like John Gottman talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And so if we really want to look at great work to understand the dating, mating, relating process, I'm here to say John Gottman's work is far more superior, in my opinion, because he's a couples therapist. He's been through tens of thousands of couples to really witness what it takes to make a healthy, happy relationship. And he doesn't look at it from a place of gender. He looks at it at emotional maturity. And that's my invitation when, if you've watched any of my YouTube videos, I'm always talking about differentiating between emotionally mature people and those who are unskilled. And oftentimes we judge those unskilled people as being bad. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they oftentimes are judged bad when they just haven't been skilled in being able to communicate their emotions in a way that lands on people. And that's where I like to go in my conversations, not the biology, the emotional maturity.
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head with your hammer. And I want to bring up something that you talk about in one of your videos. I know you have a video that it's like the 5 questions that you should, as a woman, you should ask a man to see if he's an emotionally mature individual and a potential mate. Things that I heard in one of your videos was that you point out the fact that your parents were married for 67 or 68 years, something to that effect. Not just their particular case, but all of our, my parents, our grandparents, they didn't date for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. For the most part, I think in your video, you said your parents dated for like 2 months. And of course, your mother only had, your father was the only person she had ever been with. And if they were going to be intimate sexually, the only way that was going to happen was under the umbrella of marriage.
Yes.
And so people got married 2, 3, 4 months. Like my parents knew each other for like 8, 9 months. And I think 5 or 6 months after they met, I'm like, wow, that's like no time at all. Of course, they were almost 30 when they got married, but 6 months after they met, they already, proposed and she accepted. And 3 months later, like, wow, they didn't even take a year to plan out a wedding. And my mom, she always has told me, it's like, well, we were 28, almost 29 years old. So we were old enough and mature enough to know, but I don't even think that was it. Because my grandparents were not in their, almost 30. My grandmother was in her early 20s when she married my grandfather. So I think courtship was a lot shorter. I think there was obviously more of the gender role defined,
patriarchal type of
society, expectations. Everybody was way more cookie cutter in those days than now. I think part of what's making dating so far more complex is the fact that doesn't exist any longer. We live in a different world, a different society. And part of what you were talking about, which I know Jennifer also talks about, is the fact that you have to communicate effectively. And I remember I had, I don't remember who was the speaker that I went to who said this, but she said, lack of communication, of expectations leads to frustration. And I think that if you're not able to,
probably said that.
Yeah, who?
Probably Esther Perel said that.
It's possible. But the bottom line is, if you can't communicate effectively what your expectations are, then you are going to be frustrated because the other person, I don't care how intuitive, how psychic you might be, how connected you are to another human being, the bottom line is you do need to express to that other person so that they're not wondering and guessing. And at the same time, when you express what your expectations are, that inherently creates a safe space for you and them, because now if you're not clear about that, you're like, I thought you said such and such. Did I hear you right? If there is any kind of misunderstanding, right there and then, not a day or 2 or 3 or 4 or never, right there and then you can go, oh, wait a minute, I thought you said such and such. No, what I meant was, or the tone, sometimes the tone with which you say something, you have no intention of it being harmful, but you just might be short, not because of anything they did, but just because something that's going on with you internally or your work or a frustration with your computer. And people inside, we're all kids. So we always want to take things personally and figure, oh, wow, that door, she must be pissed because it's like that door. Well, no, the door didn't slam, but the window in the other room is open. The wind came, it sucked it. So now he's going, what did I do wrong? It's like, why is she so pissed? I'm not even pissed. Communicating and expressing what your expectations are, the more we can do that, the more we can make each other feel safe. And I think that's so important in a relationship. And a lot of couples never really even talk about that, but I
Well,
think ones who do
and I
well
know
do.
Jennifer has something to say on this, but again, it goes back to being schooled. In other words, educated on how to effectively communicate. It's interesting. There's a show on Showtime called Couples Therapy, and it's basically couples therapy with like a blind camera. I mean, the couples know that they're being videotaped, but you can barely tell. And the therapist literally has to say, the man says something and then he reframes it to the woman so she can hear it, and then she says something and she's then reframing it to the woman. These are two people talking to one another, but they're not hearing one another, not because they're, by the way, these are couples who genuinely care about one another, love each other. And yet, and this isn't biology, this is what this is where I get a little bit of friction, is this isn't because a guy has a penis and a woman has a vagina, communication problems. This is because we haven't been schooled in effective communication. And there's a book that is revolutionary written by Marshall Rosenberg called Nonviolent Communication. Now, the title should have been called Compassionate Communication, because it teaches human beings how to communicate more effectively. That's one of the biggest challenges. So that's why I go back. This isn't a biology issue. This is an issue is that we haven't been schooled on how to be in healthy, happy relationships. When you take the stew that I talked about, the childhood wounds, traumas, adult traumas, life experiences, socialization, and biology, and then educate people on how to be in effectively healthy, happy relationships.
Yeah, there's a lot there that you're talking about, and I think part of, from where I stand, what I've noticed over the years is that a lot of people, if you have parents that didn't communicate well or didn't value communication, then you don't have a role model for that. And unless you take the personal responsibility and are aware that that you were not brought up in the ideal communication style in order to guarantee a great relationship, then you think that that's normal. You don't know anything different, and until you become aware that it's like, okay. And even I think in this day and age, there's been so much that has changed in the last 50 years, let alone the last 100 years. But let's just take the last 50 years to cut the century in half. In the last 25 years, with the advent, the onset of not just social media, but we have cell phones, we have texting, we have dating apps. I'll never forget when I first heard about 25 years ago, one of my husband's coworkers, I don't even know exactly how online they did this, but they met online. Obviously, it couldn't have been a dating app, but it was somehow online they met. And that was so taboo. Oh, so-and-so and so-and-so, they met online. And the dynamics are clearly different. When you meet somebody in person, you actually see the person face to face. I don't care if you're at the supermarket, the post office, walking down the street, downtown, wherever you live, at the gas station, you're still meeting the person face to face. So they're a real human being and you can feel their energy, as opposed to an impersonal app where you may or may not have a real person. It could be a legitimate human being that's looking to connect with another, or you may have someone who's a poser who needs the attention of many women, or you could have somebody who has bad intentions and they just are trying to pick out their next victim for whatever, I don't know if it's identity fraud or what their monkey is, but it's less than honorable intentions. So you have the issue that, first of all, it's an impersonal thing where it's like, it's a two-dimensional thing. It's not three-dimensional. You can't really feel their energy the way you would if it were in person, so you can't vibe them out to the same degree. And then you're not getting tone. It's just words. Some people are better writer than others. It's just like some people are better communicators than others. And some people will go ad infinitum and text forever until one party says enough texting, or let's move this to a live conversation. And then that's where some people, either.
But that's not a gender thing. That's a human thing. That's why I want to differentiate. Yes, because by the way, you did say men. I want to say equally women can do the exact same thing to men. So I just want to be able to clarify.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's just as bad.
Here in the room.
It's just as bad. There's unscrupulous men and women. Nobody has a corner on that market. It's human beings. Make no mistakes. Because I've heard from men some really, I'm like, I can't believe there's like, wow, there's,
But
it's
you
just
see
bad.
how I'm differentiating the Mars and Venus by saying it's humans and not gender.
Yeah, well, all humans have the capacity to do wrong, to do evil, have ill will, just as, and it can go infinitely in either direction.
Yeah.
Love can go infinitely in this direction, and hate can go infinitely in that direction. So hopefully, I think, I know that you guys and the people that I attract and the people that you attract, we tend to be a little bit more love going infinite in this direction as opposed to hate going into that direction. That's why we're talking here about the secrets to love and how to improve and increase your odds of connecting to that person who is going to be that intimate long-term relationship, whether in marriage or a monogamous. Hey, Evidence, you don't have to be perfect to articulate on a live YouTube stream here. So Jennifer, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to add, one of the things that really shifted things for me was learning how to ask a man for what I need in a way that inspired him to provide it for me. This is definitely something that we as women it is not instinctive for us, right? I think a lot of women will encounter a lot of resistance when, a lot of times women will pay me, good money to work with me, and then we get to the part about asking a man for what they need, and there's a lot of resistance because a part of us doesn't want to do it instinctively, and there's a reason for that, which I can go into in a minute. But one of the things that was really profound that I learned, and that has helped so many of my clients, was understanding that the same skill that you use, that I teach women to ask a man for what they need, will also help them select a better mate. And here's why. The definition of a healthy man, at least from the school of thought that I come from, is a man who, if you eloquently and in a feminine way, without attacking or criticizing, there's a clue, ask a man in a very gracious, feminine way for what you need, he will do his best to provide it for you. Now, of course, it's unrealistic to expect a man to provide all of your needs all the time. And of course, we still have to be doing our own self-work and our own self-care. That being said, interdependence means we do need things from each other, which, that's hard for a lot of people to admit. It was very hard for me to admit at first, because I was raised, as we had talked about in our initial conversation, I was raised to be extremely independent. My mother worked 2 jobs. I was raised by my brother and father. I was raised to compete like a man. I played sports. I competed academically. I graduated college with honors. I had a lot of masculine energy going on, and I didn't realize until I started taking workshops and getting obsessed with learning about how to create a healthy relationship, that a lot of the things I was doing inadvertently, not on purpose. I don't think any of us screw up our relationships on purpose, but inadvertently, things that I was doing, ways that I was being, ways that I was communicating were alienating and emasculating men. And causing men that were like, my princes one day to turn into frogs. They all of a sudden, right? It's like they were princes. They wanted to do everything. They wanted to marry me. The next day, they're like breaking up with me. And I'm like, what is wrong with men, right? And this happened to me a lot, by the way. Like I was a dating man. So this happened to me a lot until I started to understand, of course, some of those, they could have not been ready. They definitely were the wrong partner. But there were also things that I was doing that was causing the men to react in this way. And so starting to understand men better helped me to understand what things I was doing that were causing the men to react in that way. And then when I learned how to ask a man for what I need, which again, I don't think anybody knows this intuitively. It's not instinctive for us, and we are definitely not programmed. We're not taught to do this, and especially like you were saying, if we don't have ideal parent model relationships. I know I certainly didn't, right? I think especially a lot of women are around our age, their mothers were definitely kind of taught to just don't ask for what you need. Your needs are not important. Sacrifice, take care of others. Your needs are not that important. Of course, that backfired for a lot of them, many of them. And that's, one of the reasons perhaps why the divorce rate is so high. But if you know how to ask a man for what you need, and you're doing it in an effective way, and you're consistently finding that a man you're dating does not want to provide it for you, that's a clue about two things. Number one, he's probably not the right man for you, most definitely. And there's also a good chance he may not be completely healthy or ready or available for a relationship. So, learning these skills, it's just, for me and for my clients, it's so empowering, because now, instead of like hoping and praying and like, wishing and hoping that this guy will give you this thing you want and need, you have a tool that's very effective where you can ask, and if you're doing your part and communicating effectively, the answer, the response you get will be very telling about what the future of this relationship might look like. And so for me, my husband and I had this really amazing moment really early on in the relationship. It was such a great moment where he sat me down. My husband's he's from New York. He's 50 years old now. He's very direct. He sat me, he'd been married before. He was a widower. Is it widower for men? I always get that wrong. Yeah. Widower. He was a widower. He'd been happily married for 12 and a half years. So he had an experience of happy marriage that I had not had, because I'd never been married. And he sat me down one day, like 3 weeks into the relationship, and he goes, "Just so you know," he says, "I'm always going to work to give you what you need." He's like, "I'm always going to try to give you what you need." He's like, "But you have to ask for it." He's like, "That passive aggressive thing," he goes, "I don't deal with that." And he has family reasons that I won't, throw people under the bus for that, but he has reasons for not being a fan of passive aggressive behavior. And I was like, "Oh, don't worry, honey. I took a workshop in this," because I had taken a workshop and had to ask a man for what you need. And I had been practicing it with other men prior to meeting my husband. And so by the time I met my husband, it wasn't my first rodeo. It was my first go round. I'd been practicing that for a couple of years. And so we started off with this really great dynamic where, I would tune into a need, maybe because I felt annoyed, or just something I realized, wow, I really need or want this. And then I used my communication skills that I had learned from relationship experts to ask him for what he needed. And then he would either provide it for me, or he would give me a very good reason why he couldn't do it. And then I would appreciate him for providing that. And it created a really fantastic dynamic, which now I know through reading this recent book was also stimulating estrogen for me and testosterone for him, and keeping us physically healthy. So, there's, I'm going to have to say with Jonathan, I do agree that there's no one right relationship for a dynamic, because we do all have different biology and upbringings. If, however, you're a woman that's predominantly feminine energy, right? You're more of a typical female, and you want a masculine man. A lot of women complain.
I got to jump in here because I'm not trying to be confrontational, but Jennifer, some of the things that you've described, that so many people describe masculine and feminine energy, is they oftentimes throw masculine energy under the bus. It's controlling, it's dominant, it's that ambitious part of our personalities. And feminine energy is softer, and you want to attract a more masculine, more feminine. Here's what I want to say to human beings, because people who have actually integrated their, if we want to use the term masculine and feminine, but what I'm really saying is their ability to give and receive equally, their capacity to give love and receive love equally. Because we're talking about women asking for their needs, but we should also be talking about men asking for their needs as well. And I will even say further that men are weaker at asking for their needs than women. They're weaker at it because we have been told to stuff our emotions since we were children. We were told to not ask for anything, man up, be a man. And then when we throw this into the whole masculine and feminine conversation, it convolutes everything because it's energy. And then we say, well, we're really saying man and woman when we say masculine and feminine. I know we're saying it's energy, but it really isn't. Because the reality is human beings should be focused on trying to find people who are aligned to who they are and what they're not, who they are and what they want, and not get hung up on the terms masculine and feminine. This is why I'm a little anti John Gray's work. I'm more of the believer of the work of, say, if the Buddha dated, coming at it from more of a spiritual perspective, from a non-gender based, and what I mean by non-gender based is not pigeonholing the genders through this terminology of masculine and feminine. That's all I'm trying to draw attention to in the work that I'm doing. I'm trying to take it to another level, because even what you said, Jennifer, your husband's experience was passive aggressive. Well, that's a an unhealthy emotion that he was witnessing as a childhood that affected how he operates. That wasn't masculine or feminine. That wasn't man or woman. It was a behavior that he witnessed that was unhealthy. So that's what I'm here. And I apologize if I seem a little bit combative. It's because I'm trying to draw the conversation even to a bigger level, to a much deeper level than the whole pigeonholing between men and women, gender and biology and that sort of thing. Because the reality is this, okay? Yes, we know that men are provider protectors and women are berry pickers and nurturers, as Alison Armstrong talks about and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I can take a gazillion men over 50 who've been divorced that the last thing they want to do is provide for a woman because they've been raked over the coals over divorce. So what happened to that whole biology that men do that? We have to add more into the conversation to understand, as you said, Jennifer, this bigger picture of dating, mating, and relating is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So I
apologize for being forceful and just passionate. I'm just passionate.
No. And
let me Jennifer, hold on a second. I want to address something that, first of all, Jonathan, I want to say that I really appreciate your passion with which you're, sharing here in this experience, because I wanted to address two things that you talked about. And we talked about the feminine and the masculine energy. We are really a combination of both energies. Every human being has both male and female energy. It's just how we are.
Yes, I agree.
So, and sometimes our masculine or our feminine may increase or decrease on an as needed basis, just depending on a whole multitude of factors that we really can't get into now. However, you said something really important, and you said that men are wired to be providers and protectors, but they've also been raked through the coals oftentimes because many of them have had horrible experience. I mean, anybody who's been through a divorce will admit that this the least desirable experience. It is a very painful thing to go through, and a lot of men have had, like you said, raked through the coals. We won't get into that any further. But addressing what Jennifer was saying and with what you were saying, she was saying how her husband was good at communicating that she needed to express to him what she needs. And what I appreciate about him telling her that was he was making it safe and giving her the green light. It's like, if you want something, you need something, express it to me. Now, I want to hit the pause button here because I think a lot of women hearing that is like, oh, all men should do that. And anything I ask for.
He's an emotionally mature guy. That's the difference. He's an emotionally mature guy. And that's what I want to draw attention to. Emotional maturity is not a gender thing.
Exactly. But at the same time, as a woman or a man, we're taking it from Jennifer's perspective with her husband. She had a safe place to ask for what she needs. But you know what? She also has to show up in that space, say, this is what I need, this is what I would like, and give him the freedom to say yay or nay. Yeah. And if he says no, or not now, not throw a hissy fit, not try to control, manipulate, or gaslight him, or figure out some other, no. His no should be respected, just as if the wheels are turned and she has to decline or say not now, that should be respected. I don't think it's a reasonable.
Well, John Gottman talks about asking for bids. They're requests. These are bids and requests that we make. And in every relationship, there's a give and take. By the way, I didn't mean to, Jennifer, I apologize if I characterize your husband in the, because I totally value his emotional maturity. Yeah. I just want to draw attention to the bigger picture beyond the biology, because we started this conversation with John Gray and biology. And I'm here to take this whole conversation to the level of understanding is we better start looking at everything, because a lot of dating coaches focus solely on biology and ego-based way of dating. It's all predicated on those initial stages of landing someone based on what I say ego is pandering to ego and not understanding the whole picture of a human being. Because here's the thing, you can land a relationship and it can be a nightmare, but you followed all the John Gray rule. I mean, no disrespect to John Gray, I apologize. But I'm just saying you could follow all the biology rules and still have a terrible relationship, is what I'm getting at.
Well, you addressed something earlier too. It's like when you have a relationship, and I've been talking about this for probably 5-6 years now, and it's one of the things that I recognize that you need to have in a relationship in order, I know for myself, to have a healthy relationship dynamic, I need to be able to give love to somebody, and I need to feel that they can receive the love that I have to give, and not feel like they're constantly either pushing me away, or they always have a wall where it's like, yeah, they'll give me love, but there's always a wall because they'll only give so much and they definitely can't receive what it is that I have to offer. That disrupts the flow.
Yes.
For me, if I have a loving, generous heart, I don't want to have to put brakes on my love for someone. Just like my kids, do you think that I put any conditions or brakes on how much love I'm going to give to my daughter or my son? No, I just freely love them. And as a mother, they freely love me. And if they choose to hold back a little bit because they're my kids, that's different. With a partner, I want to feel free to completely give to him and have him receive it. And I want to be able to receive his love as well.
Absolutely.
As long as the energy, and it's not like a wheel that goes this way or a wheel that goes that way.
Yeah, because giving and receiving is not masculine and feminine. It's just giving and receiving. That's where the hang up is let's just focus on giving and receiving in a mutual collaboration and take out the verbiage that oftentimes trips people up in the dating, mating, and relating process is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I agree. Jennifer, you want to jump in and say something?
Yeah. So I do. Thank you for the invitation. So as far as Jonathan, I appreciate your passion. Also, I want to come back to center on my philosophy of a healthy relationship, which is a healthy relationship is one where both partners are getting their needs met. So I think a lot of times it's interesting, whether I'm talking to men or women, a lot of times there's this sort of tendency to think that somehow we're taking a side. And I think as soon as we think we're taking a side, like pro man, pro woman, that's where we've kind of lost the intention that we're holding, which is that everybody, in a healthy relationship, everybody can communicate freely. Everybody's feelings are valid. Everybody's needs are important. And so, I encourage people, if you want to be in a healthy relationship, come in with that intention. The intention of, I'm going to be aware of my needs. I'm going to communicate my needs in an effective, nonviolent, healthy way. I'm going to also pay attention to what my partner needs. Now, here's one of the other sort of I've had, we go through transformational processes. We have moments of our mind being blown, right? Like, oh my God, this is so big. So one of the biggest insights I had was that the way that we experience love is very unique and individual, meaning I found out early on for sure that the way my husband most deeply experiences love and wants to receive love is very different at times. I mean, there's definitely places where we cross over. We both are, really into physical affection, so that works for us. But there are other ways where there are things that I want and need that he does not want to need at all. And there are things that he wants and needs that they're not really a big deal. And this is kind of where we get into the 5 love language conversation, but it goes deeper than that. I mean, there's I do think it's helpful. Certainly I don't like to pigeonhole either, because we're all a mix of, whatever you want to call it, feminine, masculine, hunter-gatherer, estrogen, testosterone, whatever you want to call it. We're all a mix of that. I like to use that conversation as an entry point into learning about your partner, because we're all this unique mix of masculine, feminine, love language, this trigger, this is a wound from childhood that we need some sensitivity around. We all have a way that works for us to be loved. And so if you want to be successful in relationship, you can use all of these, John Gottman, Alison Armstrong, John Gray, you can use all of this stuff as an entry point. And at the end of the day, you just have to listen to your partner. At the end of the day, it's about what is your partner actually saying, and are you actually really hearing and listening? And then do you have the capacity to do your best to provide that for your partner? For me, these are all just entry point conversations. At the end of the day, it's really about the two people in the relationship. And one couple might do John Gottman work, and that's their mind-blowing transformational thing, and that saved their marriage. And another person, they just for me, the 5 love languages had like learning that my husband's top love language is completely different than mine was, it was mind blowing. Do you want to hear the story? It's kind of a cool story. Do you like stories?
Yeah, please do tell us the story.
All right. So, one of my mentors had told me about the Five Love Languages book, and just a little backstory. For the first couple years of my relationship, I had learned that men like to feel like the hero and whatnot. So I was like laying on the praise to my husband. I was like, "Oh, you're my hero. You're doing so great." And this, and he'd always be like, "Yeah, cool." And I was like, "Oh my God, what is it going to take to have him get lit up when someone gives him a compliment the way that I light up when someone gives me a compliment," right? Because like, you give me a compliment, I'll be hyped for like 3 days. I'll be your best friend forever. You think I'm amazing, I'm like, I love you forever. And my husband, I'm like telling him all these compliments, and I could tell he appreciated it, but there was no like lighting up of his soul. And I'm like, what is it going to take? So I learned about these 5 love languages, and just a quick review. There's 5 different love languages for those of you that don't know it. There's words of affirmation, there's physical affection, there's acts of service, there's quality time, and there's receiving gifts, right? And so I go to my husband, I'm reading this book, because I like to use these conversations as entry points. Like, honey, what do you think about this? And we have some really great conversations, because I bring him stuff that I'm learning, and I say, honey, what do you think about this? And I said to him, so I'm reading this book called The 5 Love Languages. I says, which of these, is the most valuable to you? Like, which of these makes you feel the most loved? And I read off the list to him, and he thinks, and it, like, without hesitation, he goes, oh, quality time. I was like, quality time? What do you mean by that? He says, oh, he goes, like when we go on a bike ride at the beach. I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, that makes me feel loved. I said, wait, hold on a second. Wait. I was like, when we go on a bike ride at the beach, I said, that's when you feel most loved. He goes, yeah, I really like spending time with you and doing activities with you. And I was like, but that's exercise. And he goes, Lily, and he goes, and when like you give me all those compliments, I'm like, yeah. He goes, it kind of doesn't really do it for me. And I was like, mind blown. Because his way that he wants to be loved, his highest way, the way that he most deeply feels like my wife loves me, I'm loved, is different than mine. Not all of it. Like I said, physical affection is the number 2 love language for both of us. So there's a lot of hugging going on in this relationship. So that works for us. But the quality time thing, like that's like my last, like it's maybe my 3rd to last or 4th. I don't need that much time with people. Like, in fact, I was always the person who, like, you go out to dinner with someone, I'm like, okay, let's go, I got stuff to do. Like, to me, it's like, they give me a compliment and like hug me, I got what I needed, let's go. I don't need to spend 4 hours with you. Like, I want to go do other stuff. And some people, they really like to spend time with people because they feel loved. And so I think that, to me, that was one of the most important conversations of my life, because it started this awareness of, we don't all experience love the same. We experience love very differently. And, you could pigeon, you could take that 100 different ways. It could be masculine, feminine. It could be love languages. It could be, are we more visual? Are we more auditory? Are we more kinesthetic? There's
we add love attachment style in there, and imago in there. And
right.
So it's, and Jennifer, I really appreciate what you said, because for those listening to this, we've been rattling off a lot of things, and it's because we've studied lots of different things. The 3 of us here, and many of the coaches out there, we've studied a lot of different disciplines. Understanding all these pieces helps in not only just being a better person for yourself, because that's really ultimately what your goal is, really the experience for yourself. But it also allows you to be a better partner to someone. What I like to think of also, it helps you vet for better partners. Because ultimately, here's the thing where biology trips us up, because chemistry is an addictive drug. It is dopamine being released in our body. Chemicals are being released in our body, saying, and oxytocin and dopamine, along with the estrogen and the testosterone, that says we should mate with this person. And then what ends up happening is you mate with someone, and I just mean you have sex with them, and you become attached to someone who could be a terrible partner for you. And so at least I know I talk about this, is to draw awareness, not to blindly follow biology, in the process of choosing a mate, is to really,
Yeah.
and by the way, the 5 love languages is a perfect example. I will say the importance of reading John Gottman's book, 8 Dates, is critically important for anyone who wants to go down the partnership track of eventual marriage, because he has identified the 8 roadblocks that causes divorces. So when you understand, and by the way, this is critically important, going back to what Jennifer said about understanding. When you understand what causes divorces before you ever get married, you're better prepared, versus like what I did when I went through my divorce and I'm sitting in family court in front of a judge and I'm listening to all these other people going through. By the way, when you're in family court, there could be 6 other couples in there going through at the same time. And you might be sitting hearing different experiences. I say it's important to understand what it takes to create a healthy relationship by understanding what causes divorces. And it's not just sex and money, which are the 2 primary reasons that it happened. It's more about communication skills. It's not being aligned in love languages. It's, someone is an avoidant personality or love attachment, and the other person's an anxious. And there's a lot to unpack. And I will say this for anyone watching, you might be pulling your hair out going, wait a minute, this is too much. I thought love was supposed to be easy. Well, if it was that easy, none of us would be out there talking about this.
Okay, so this is another critical point. Okay, you're saying about how love is supposed to be easy, but it is a complex. Human beings are complex.
Yeah.
So you take one complex female and you add a complex male, and okay. That being said, there is a match for you out there, but I think you have to take. First most important relationship, I think we'll all agree here, is the relationship that you have with yourself is first and foremost the most important relationship. You have to love yourself above anybody else. If you don't love you, why the hell would anybody else love you? And if you love them more than you love you, it's not going to work.
It's a recipe for disaster right there.
No, you have your own self-preservation, your own recognition of the love that you truly are will have you recognize the love that that person has within them. And then 2 whole people can come together, as opposed to someone who's broken looking. It's like, oh, I love them so much. I love them more than I love myself. Well, that's, somebody who's looking for a therapist, patient type, or, mentor, subject, fix me. That's not sexy and attractive whatsoever. Now, all that being said, once you have that piece in place, I want to address an issue, because I have a friend of mine who's a very well-to-do, successful, not only screenwriter, but author of a ton of children's books. And chick lives in New York City. And I'll never forget when he told me, this is years ago, he told me, oh my gosh, just on my way to work or when I go to get my coffee at Starbucks in the morning, I probably see 25 to 35 gorgeous women every morning just on my way to go to Starbucks. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that's a thing. 20, 30 women on my way to work all the time. I'm like, I don't think I've seen her met 25, 30 good-looking men that I would be attracted to in my lifetime. So to hear that he saw that on a daily
Good luck
basis,
doing that during COVID, by the way.
That's a whole other.
Okay, so this is this thing that I learned from going on with this whole pandemic and so forth, which I think really makes this type of interaction with you two even more valuable in this day and age. But I'll never forget, after we did a writing project together. And so I got to speak to him on a more intimate level, because we were basically 3 out of 5 work days we were coming together to write. And so ultimately at some point he ended up sending me pictures of some of these girls that he thought were, in his eyes, they were just like cuter than anything and just hot, hot, hot. And I remember thinking, it's like, oh, I didn't even think, it doesn't matter what I think, because if he thinks they're attractive, that's all that matters. But I remember just thinking to myself, okay, it kind of made me query and start to ask more questions along these lines because I have 2 brothers. And I said, hey, do you see on your way to work or while you're working or you're out and about, do you see like beautiful women like every day? And I have a brother who actually works and lives in like Beverly Hills area. And he's like, yeah, there's like the perfect people are like everywhere. So he sees gorgeous women all the time. And I'm like, really? So as I queried with some of my friends who live all over the country, with men, this tended to be true where they see, now that doesn't mean that they're going to want to have a relationship with every one of them, but they see a lot more prospects as opposed to women who were like, oh no, if it comes to a dating app, you're like swipe, 100, 200, 300 people before you'll go, okay, let me read his profile. And then you start pairing.
You don't think that exact same thing happens for men?
I think that there's a certain type of, there is, I think, a
by
certain
the way,
type
by the way, because I'm single right now. I'm on dating apps now. If I judged based on looks, I can make the same argument that women make. I mean, because I'm a dating coach for women, so I hear them saying there's no good-looking men. Now, first off, I don't even like the characterization based on looks, but if we're going to go down that route, I could say the equally same thing for men, and men could and by the way, men in this by the way, if he's a 50-year-old man, is he talking about 25-year-old women, or is he talking about women his own age? Now, I'm just differentiating here for a second.
Yeah, it didn't. But the pictures that I saw, the women were, I'd say 30 to 50 something.
I could say that men are visual creatures. We make choices based on vision. That's certainly true. But
are
equally visual creatures. I could say women are equally visual, not equally, but almost equally visual, at least in today's realm. When it comes to the dating apps, as an example.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you have to have some sort of attraction. I mean, somebody who's like super fit is not going to get, in all likelihood, is not going to go for somebody who's super unfit, because one has an active lifestyle, the other one clearly doesn't. So you want somebody that's more congruent.
Although that unfit person still wants the fit person.
Sometimes, yeah, but the truth of the matter is, if it doesn't matter what your body type is, it doesn't matter what hair color, what height, there is a match for everybody. It doesn't matter. All those things, like I know guys who only like really curvy girls, and for them, a thin girl or a petite girl, it's like it just doesn't do anything for them. And so they want a girl that there's a lot to hold and hug, and that's their thing. And then there are other guys who no, they don't really like the super voluptuous look. They want a more slender type. So the bottom line is everybody is attractive to somebody. And again, going back to the whole self-love, you self-love yourself now, not when you become a size on the way up or on the way down or anywhere in between. It's like where you are now, you are perfectly imperfect, and so is that other person that is eventually going to come.
We should point out that loving yourself is not a destination, because there's this misconception. There's this saying that you have to love yourself before you love another. I just want to clarify that, because that's a never-ending journey that happens about 12 seconds before you die is when you truly fall deeply in love with yourself, because now you're going to the other side. I just want to say that so long as you're working, and so in my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? It's a journey to invite personal development, self-help, and spiritual work as a daily practice to heal from the inside, to find inner peace. Because when you're operating from a place of greater inner peace, you become a magnetic attractor for people that are aligned to who you are and what you want. And you also won't get so disappointed, so jaded, so bitter over the process, which oftentimes happens. Because here's the challenge with dating as well. For a lot of people, if you've dated a lot and have had a lot of unhappy experiences, it wears on you emotionally. My mother, who's in that picture, one guy in her whole life, that's all she dealt with. I know women in their 50s and 60s that might have had dozens and dozens of partners, or, short-lived relationships, long relationships. And when you have a lot that don't go the distance, it can emotionally wear on you. And so I just want to draw greater attention to being better at vetting people, being more mindful in the process than the biology piece. Because if we follow biology, I like what Marianne Williamson says in her speeches. She says, she says something to her audience. She says, when you meet someone and you have amazing chemistry off the charts and you're ready to fall deeply, madly in love, what should you do? And her whole audience screams at the same time, pray. Pray, because you better pray, because it could be a nightmare for you if you follow biology and not understand human behavior, is what I'm getting at.
You know, I think that's another point that you bring out that is very important, because I think people think that just because you have a physical reaction and a physical attraction to somebody, and you have that chemistry with somebody, that's not a sign that you're supposed to be together. That's just one of several components. And I think that if you want to,
Oh,
She froze.
of a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different religions, and it tells you to treasure your heart and to guard it and to not squander it, not readily open it up to just, don't give pearls to swines, to quote another scripture. Because the reality is where your heart is, that's where your treasure truly is. And trust is something that needs to be earned. It's not just something that you give to everybody, especially in an intimate type of relationship. So I think, God gave us a brain, gave us intellect, gave us instincts. We're supposed to use them. So, one of the steps is, you have to have chemistry and attraction with another, because that's part of the makeup of not only procreation, but wanting to mate and be together. But it's not it's not like the first thing and it has an 88% value. I think there's probably, if you want to super simplify it, you can probably boil it down to maybe 5 or 10 things that have equal weighted value of 10 to 20%. And if 80% of those things are in place, then that means that you both can fulfill each other's needs, you can communicate, you can come together. Then I think you have enough stick-to-itiveness to go the long haul with this person. But just chemistry, or just intellectual compatibility, or just financial responsibility, it's not the coup de grace, like you're saying. You want to say something, Jennifer?
yes, I do. I have a lot to say on this topic, actually. So I look at it, I'll just start with this, like a triangle, right? So you've got spiritual at the top, and then you have mental, emotional, and you have physical. And prior to meeting my husband, this just came to me one day while I was journaling, and I was like, this is what I'm looking for. I want all 3 components. I want the spiritual connection, I want the mental, emotional connection, but there also has to be a physical. I will say I wholeheartedly agree with both of you. If you just have chemistry and the other pieces aren't in place, or there's other reasons you're not compatible, that's not a good situation, especially if you move forward. I dated one particular man on and off for 12 years because we had excellent chemistry. And thank God I finally had the wisdom and the courage to just say, this isn't a life partnership. And I actually met my husband 3 days. My husband emailed me online 3 days after that, when I finally said, we're done. This is not happening anymore at all. And I cut the cord, and I said, I want the whole shebang. And I mean, I'd been doing a lot of transformational work, but I think the timing of that's a little interesting, when I finally said, I want more than just the chemistry. So I see it from 2 sides, though. There's 2 sides to this chemistry conversation, because yes, you definitely don't want chemistry to be and biology to be the dominant factor, and it has to go way beyond that to be a healthy relationship. On the other side of the spectrum, I've been a relationship coach for about 10 years now. I started working predominantly with singles, but it evolved into working with couples. And in my 10 years time, and I know this sounds like a whatever, but it's true. In my time working with couples, I've only had to help one couple do what I call consciously uncouple. One. Okay. Usually I work with people, I help them heal what's hurting, the resentment. I empower them with some great communication skills, and they're off and running. Probably because their marriage wasn't like beyond the point of repair. They were like just needing a
good foundation.
Yeah. But there was one couple that the man came to me and he said, I don't know if I want to be with my wife anymore. I said, what's the problem? He said, there's no chemistry. And so I asked a really important question, which is I said, okay, so tell me about this chemistry. Did you have chemistry initially and then it dissolved or dwindled or what? He says, we never really had chemistry. And I went, ooh. So here's the thing. And I asked him, I said, a scale of 1 to 10, how attracted were you to your wife when you met her? He said 4. And I'm going, I discussed it with my husband, and Rainey says to me, he goes, why did they get married? I'm like, yeah, that's the 64,000. So I still did everything with them, but here's the thing. I think it goes down to people's preferences. Some people have a higher preference on intimacy and sex and chemistry than others. Some people are a little bit less, I don't know if I believe this. Maybe it's just my own perspective, whatever. But, some people, it's not as important and they're really looking more for the emotional, spiritual. I really like to see the triangle. If people are looking at life partnership, I like to see all 3 components. And, I just encourage people on the other side of the coin, if chemistry is important to you and intimacy and sex are important to you, and everything else is there, but you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm attracted to them. I would be conscious of that too. Now, here's where it gets tricky, okay, is I agree with Marianne Williamson. We've all, at least every woman I know has had what I call the fatal attraction, right? Where it's like,
By the way, we men too.
You guys have it too, right? Like,
oh God, yeah. We've had
like blowing.
There was a movie called Fatal Attraction about a woman.
Right.
Fatal attraction.
So anyway, so everybody's had their one person that's just like their Achilles, like they just like the person could like blow boogers on you and you'd be like, you're amazing. Like, like you're so amazing. They're like, they can do no wrong. Like, they're like, like robbing banks and you're like, you're so courageous, or whatever. So, there's that aspect. But here's when I was going through my dating process, because everything that I teach comes from my own initial process was how I start. I have training and all that, but I like to use real life experience of myself and my clients because I think that's the most valuable. And so what I was clear on when I was, I usually have people write a list of your 5, there's a specific way, narrowing down your 5 to 8 must have qualities that you must have in a partner. And when I was doing this, chemistry made my top 5. My thought process, and this is just me, doesn't mean it's everybody, my thought process is if I'm gonna be married to someone for the next 50 years, I better wanna jump into bed with them. Like, I just don't wanna marry somebody that I'm like, I'd rather watch TV. Like that, that's not the kind of relationship that I envisioned. I wanted an intimate, passionate relationship. And then one of my main mentors is saying, don't date anybody who's above a 6 on the scale of 1 to 10 of chemistry for you. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be with just a 6. I want to be with a 7 or an 8 or higher. And here's her reasoning for this, and it's not bad reasoning. Her reasoning for this,
you said don't date above a 6?
Yeah, one of my mentors, that's her thing. Like, don't date anyone that's higher than a level of 6.
Wait, was she saying this for both men and women or strictly to women?
She was saying specifically for women. I don't know how she coaches men. It was a workshop for women, so she was saying this specifically for women. Now, me and one of her other students, proteges, people that she's certified and work with. So personally, and here's her reasoning for this, and it's not bad reasoning. Her reasoning is that if you've got too high of attraction, what can happen is you start sacrificing your own needs. You stop honoring yourself. You lose touch with yourself. You're not, staying grounded in your boundaries and healthy practices, and you end up over giving, and it ends up backfiring. And I get all that. Here's where my mind went. I don't want to contract down to a 6, so I need to bring my self-love boundary game up to be able to handle
exactly.
a man who had higher attraction. When I met my husband, we met online, we had amazing connection. Like immediately it felt right. It felt like home. But we talked for 3 weeks, and then we had, of course, our meeting in person. And, he had even told me, he's like, look, if there's an attraction in this relationship, we'll go somewhere. Because he knew what he wanted. He'd been married before, he knew what he wanted. And he show up and, he was a 9 for me. I tell him that, he knows that. He's okay that he's not in that. I said he was a 9. Like
I didn't reach 10. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
like, he was a 9. I was like, oh, this guy's pretty hot. Like it was definitely an instant chemistry. And I was just really glad that I, again, had been practicing staying true to myself, practicing self-care, practicing, checking in with myself, going, am I losing myself in this relationship, or am I staying present with what's coming up for me and what I need? And, of course, staying present to the other person's partners too. But again, coming back to center, healthy relationship, 2 people know what they need. They communicate their needs. They do their best to provide each other's needs. It's actually simple, but then of course there's all these, nuances that we have to learn. But I like to always bring it back to center. Like if I feel my relationship's out of balance at all, I'm looking at, okay, where are needs not being met? And then sometimes it's even a question of like, what do you need? And I agree with you, Jonathan, men don't always know what they need, but a woman can help a man find what
I go on to say most men are actually very clueless in relationship. And by the way, I'm going to pivot here for a second just because you brought that up. I'm here to help women understand men from a different perspective. I'm here to say, women, it's interesting. Why is the #1 search term for women why men pull away, why men ghost, why men disappear? That's the #1 search term for women. It's their top thing. And then the second right along with that is, why are men commitment phobic? And why I'm bringing this up is it's fascinating. Women kind of traditionally expect men to be the leaders of the relationship, but yet they have a propensity past my father's era. Okay, as Lillian said, if we think of the last 50 years, men are rather not all men, but a majority of men are rather clueless in relationships. So what I find fascinating is that women want men to lead. And I always say, you're giving the job to the wrong person. Now, some people might think, well, Jonathan, that might be masculine, feminine energy conflicts and whatnot. No, I'm here to say, ladies, you are in charge of your relationship destiny. And it starts, as Lillian and Jennifer said, the relationship with yourself is the most important relationship to begin on the journey to finding a life mate. And when you find a life mate, I recommend thinking of the idea of co-creating a relationship rather than having any expectation men lead, because they have a typical propensity to being bad at it. 90% of all relationship books are purchased by women. They're not purchased by men. Men are very poorly schooled at relationships. Hence why I always say women are the emotional leaders of the relationship and not men, or at least can be the lead by example. And that's, again, the conversations that I like to dig in deeper. And just to piggyback on chemistry, I feel bad for the guy that married a woman that he had no chemistry with. That's probably the exception, not the rule. But I don't like a coach saying, choose a 6 because you don't have a capacity to be strong in relationship. That's terrible advice.
Yeah, I didn't like
Focus on making the person whole and not saying pick a 6 because you're not strong enough to ask for what you want. That's lame advice. I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad, I agree with a good portion of this mentor's teachings. That one, I was like, it didn't sit right for me. And I was like, I'm going to have to go I'm going to have to go rogue on this one, do my own thing.
I'm glad you did.
I'm glad you did, because, I'm like.
Feel a 10 in connection. Choose a partner that you have a strong emotional and physical connection.
And spiritual
not
connection.
Just one-sided to physical.
Well, and I think paying attention to what you both said, and I love how Jennifer articulated it, where she's talking about the triangle where spiritual is on the top, and then you have the emotional, you said mental, emotional,
and physical.
And then physical. One of the key elements I think that women and men both need to pay attention to is like, if you care about what the needs are of the other person, and pay attention that they care also, that's reciprocated.
Yes.
If you care and they don't, it's not going to work. If they care and you don't, it's not going to work.
By the way, John Gottman talks this 3 stages or phases of love. And first is, I need my needs met. I need my needs met. Stage 2 is, I meet my partner's needs. So I go from my needs being met to I meet my partner's needs. The third stage, this is really the deeper stage of love, is where your partner's needs become your needs. You actually step in. That's the real, the trinity, if you will, or the apex of reaching a state of real harmonious love, where you can actually go, you know, my partner's needs actually become my needs. And I don't mean that you adopt every need, but there's a propensity towards that. And sadly, at least here in the United States, I can't speak for around the world. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, said today's American is the most narcissistic dater on the planet because they're only focused on getting their needs met. And she went on to say it's trying to find someone better than themselves rather than working on themselves to become a partner that can meet their needs and then go the next level of my partner's needs become my needs.
100%.
That's what.
Go ahead.
What happened?
She's cutting out.
Emotionally mature, conscientious people. You have your needs met. You also have needs to make sure that partner needs are met, because it doesn't feel good to just have your needs met and to have your needs ignored. There's something that inherently not.
Lillian, you're stuck, by the way. Your internet is stuck.
Yeah, you're breaking up really bad, pretty badly.
And by the way, when I said those things, they go both ways, by the way, Jennifer.
Oh, I know that you meant that. No, I know
I
that you
didn't
meant
articulate that.
that. I was going to say something, but I got distracted by the internet issues. There was something I wanted to say. If it's important,
I've got to wrap up soon.
recognize. I wonder what happened to Lily. This is maybe she'll come back on. It was weird because she had made me the host for a minute. But anyways, what was I going to say? Can you briefly remind me what you were talking about, because it will probably trigger. Can you summarize?
Oh, I was talking about the three basic phases of love, and then I was talking about Elizabeth Gilbert talking about how actually most Americans, both men and women alike, tend to be more narcissistic. They want their needs met, and they're not actively, even though women tend to believe they're focused on the guy's needs. It's not. Oh, I can tell you there are a lot of men that don't feel that way. So
well, that goes back to the conversation we were having before about we all experience love in different ways. And one thing I was going to say on that I didn't say before was that I've noticed that my husband and I both noticed that people tend to default to giving what they want to receive instead of tuning into what does your partner need, because those aren't the same things.
By using the love languages, for the analogy I said, is my love language is words, and then you find out your partner's love language is service. Well, first stage is I want my needs met. Well, then second stage is, you know what, even though I'm not service, I'm going to do service because that's what my partner needs. And then you reach the third level is, you know what, service becomes one of your love languages. In other words, that's truly reaching the apex of love, of at least in John Gottman's way.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because, as I mentioned, I'm not a quality time person and my husband is. And most nights, we spend about an hour of quality time together at the end of the day, which is, I know, way above that. I think the average couple spends 15 minutes, but I've come to,
wait, that's the average is 15? You see, the average should be 10 hours, and I'm exaggerating.
Well, I don't know about that.
An hour.
Yeah, 15 minutes. This was obviously pre-COVID. Now they're all probably spending.
Yeah, you better learn quality
time. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I've come to I was noticing the other night, I was like, I really enjoy our quality time together. And I think knowing that I'm, giving him what he needs. And also, he's when I'm giving him his love language, it puts him in a good energy. And I like being around good energy. So, I totally can see, I think it does, in a healthy relationship, it does evolve into that, where the line between your needs and theirs start to blur. It's a really great distinction. Thank you for bringing that up.
I've noticed that in the most healthiest couples that I've observed, that becomes that apex within their love experience. So, hey, Lillian, I got to run in a few minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say we got to wrap it up here because we're coming here definitely over an hour. But this has been an exciting week. Obviously, series on this alone, and obviously, you, Jonathan, your YouTube on.
You keep cutting
and
out.
as you do, thank you for all wisdom and experience that you've shared here during this broadcast. Jonathan, would you let our listeners know where it is that they can reach you?
Sure. So I've got a YouTube channel. My name is Jonathan Asley. It's listed right there. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a podcast called the What Would Love Do podcast, where we explore life, love, and the pursuit of inner peace through the eyes of love. I've got my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? You could go to selflovethebook.com. And then my website, jonathanasley.com.
Fantastic. And Jennifer, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, I'm pretty active on social media, so you can look up my personal page, which is Jennifer Gaynor-Yaker. That's GAYNOR-YAKER. Conscious Life Coaching on Instagram. And please go ahead. And my website's Joytopia. That's Joy, the word joy, and then the last part of utopia. And Joytopia, what that represents is the possibility that exists to create joy in our interpersonal romantic relationship. So Joytopia, it's a word that I made up to represent that place that we can achieve if we empower ourselves with relationship skills. On that note, I am going to be doing a 6-week program soon on the fundamentals of creating a healthy relationship. That's coming up soon. So please do connect with me to make sure that you get the announcement. And if you want to get on the waiting list for that, you can email me at jen@joytopiacoaching.com to get on the waiting list for that program.
Fantastic. So I'll make sure to put your information, both how you can get in touch with Jonathan as well as Jennifer, for an absolutely wonderful podcast. And make sure you turn on to Love and Money Secrets TV for more exciting clandestine secrets to success for you. Ciao for now.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye now. Bye, Jennifer. Bye, Lillian.
Bye, Jonathan. Nice talking to you. Bye.
Likewise.
Thank you.